does any of this tie into, I mean, like subject matter wise, I guess it does, as far as like accusations of anti-Semitism when it comes to the Women's March or to Mark Lamont Hill? Do you want to like pivot to one of those?
Okay, yeah, I think it is a bit separate because let's not mix necessarily and like both of these movements. So the BDS movement, I would say, would probably have a couple of things in common with the Women's March organizers, but they're, to be honest with you, they're much more intelligent about the way they make their points. And so I would say that it's a little bit of a separate issue. So the story I wrote for the King David Journal is this is kind of an investigation, but it wasn't as difficult of an investigation as the one I did that I published on your site, HB, because it's all on Twitter. So,
oh right, yeah, you can just go through the tweets.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, and it just, when I try to illustrate here is that people just have absolutely no shame. They'll call for people to condemn anti-Semitism and stand up against it, while they themselves are basically engaged in a slobber fest with people who actually practice it. So yeah. The fact is that the Women's March leaders, so they are deeply connected to politicians in the Democratic Party. In the case of Linda Sarsour, I think she has associations with people in New York's municipal government, specifically Mayor de Blasio and a number of other people. Mm-hmm. And then Tamika Mallory was at one point an advisor to Vice President Biden on I believe, gun violence. So, in pursuit of making the Women's March kind of a real institution that they can bring forward in order to make money with and obviously promote whatever causes they have, blah, 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 whether it's Sharia law or faux feminism. So they are hooked up at the hip with a lot of these organizations. One of them is the American Federations of Teachers. And the AFT is headed by a Jewish woman named Randi Weingarten, who is basically, she's just a union boss, classic union boss, hooked up with the Democratic Party. And she's gay and she's married to a woman rabbi.
Jesus.
So what I found was that, so let me start at the beginning.
Sure.
So on December 12th, the American Federation of Teachers claimed that there was a vandalism attack on their location, their headquarters in Washington, D.C., because somebody spray painted the words, "I want Jexit," in the vicinity. So, maybe it was an anti-Semitic attack, as they alleged it was. But if you look on Twitter or anywhere else for the what the word Jexit is, it has nothing to do with Jews, apparently. It has to do with the manager of Manchester United, who was, he was kind of going through a rough period. Mm-hmm. Jose Mourinho, he's Portuguese.
Okay.
So they call, the Manchester United fans were calling for his firing, and they called it Jexit. So that's one explanation. The other explanation, so there's two more, neither of which are has anything to do with Jews. Jeremy Corbyn, who's the head of the Labour Party, a lot of his opponents wanted to quit, and they call that Jexit. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has been accused of anti-Semitism. So if anything, if you were calling for Jexit, you might be opposed to anti-Semitism. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't make much sense either. The third one is the possible exit of Jamaica from the Caribbean community. So there have been no leads to this. I don't see any evidence that there was anybody. And remember, Washington, D.C., there's a lot of CCTV there. There's plenty of surveillance around the city. So nobody has been caught yet in commission of this heinous crime. Mm-hmm. of spraying some sort of strange slogan there. Yeah. And I mean, think about it. Who knows why somebody would spray something anti-Semitic on the headquarters of a teachers union? What does the teachers union have to do with? I mean, they don't know necessarily who heads the teachers union. So how could they establish the motive behind the attack anyway? So I think it's just a weird, random incident, and it's still a mystery. But it happened to be the same week as, let me see, are you showing the photo? So there's a photo of her and her...
The tweet where they're all standing together?
Yeah. Basically standing together. And she says, while we don't agree on everything, Sarsour and Mallory are warriors for justice, and I'm honored to know them and work with them and call them friends. Glad to have this meeting today with them and Kleinbaum, who's her wife, debunking myths. So they never issued a follow-up on that. They never discussed what they were talking about to the public. So basically, if you go to that tweet, people are like literally roasting them alive, because at this point, a lot of the Women's March's former supporters think of it as kind of an embarrassment. People, even Alyssa Milano, who she's a complete Fruit Loop, has renounced the Women's March, and they're basically falling apart around the country in Washington State and in New Orleans. So, ironically, they have been basically ignoring this. Weingarten hasn't issued any follow-up statement to this, to my knowledge. I'll have to, check in, because I've been kind of busy this week. But, it comes on the backdrop of a lot of investigations into the Women's March, including ones that revealed that even at the beginning of the Women's March, a lot of these organizers were privy to conversations where Mallory and Carmen Perez, who's one of the other co-chairs, they actually said, the Jews were behind the slave trade. The Jews have, a lot of derogatory statements based on Nation of Islam theories on the Jews. Now, I don't think a lot of people in your audience will care, because I mean, that's fine. I'm just saying that the idea is that these are the people complaining about anti-Semitism, and yet they're the ones who are organizing it. And these dirty union bosses, who one of them happens to be the rabbi of an LGBT synagogue, they're there, glad handing with them. Meanwhile, back in 2017, after Charlottesville, she said, this is a moment of moral clarity. You either stand against racism and anti-Semitism and bigotry, or you don't. So it's like,
it's purely political here. Like they're like this woman. You would think that, like, if she's a rabbi or married to a rabbi, all anti-Semitism would bother her. But she really only cares about if it's politically expedient. It's so if it's her side, she doesn't care. If it's the other side, she's going to make a big deal out of it. Or if it's something that they're not sure of, she's still going to make a big deal out of it and try to exploit it for all that it's worth.
Yeah, if you're the head of the teachers union, your political hookups are going to be with people like the Women's March organizers and other like Democratic Party linked organizations. So she, for sure, I mean, she's basically committed to an institution. She's not committed to any principle or anything, whether it's fighting against racism and anti-Semitism. And by the way, I mean, if you look at, I made this point when I was writing articles back in the spring for your site. If you focus on the problems with the Women's March being linked to Farrakhan, it forget the Jews. He said some pretty retarded shit about even Koreans, about Arabs, specifically about Palestinians. He said that they deal guns in Chicago. He said he said stuff about women. He said that a woman who can't cook is basically worthless. Yeah, so I mean,
he's also very anti-LGBT, especially according to their standards.
Oh, absolutely. So it's like literally being somebody who, you're basically like a front for your worst enemy. You're like the sheep that's representing the wolves. And then to top that irony, she campaigned for Keith Ellison 2 years ago. When he was running for chair of the DNC.
Here's a picture, Weingarten with Keith Ellison. Fascinating.
Right. So and then I thought you would like this. I mean, you like me. We're all into like some of the Russophobia.
Yeah.
So she accused. This is before she's like the proto Russiagate. You know how Iggy Pop was before punk rock. Okay. So she was the Russiagate before Russiagate. She accused somebody in 2014 who was accusing her of supporting anti-Semites and homophobes in Ukraine. So she said that you must be supporting the Russians.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Is this the first Russian accusation on record? I'm trying to...
Well, I mean, it wasn't for the same reasons, but you know, it's the same type of reflex reaction that, you know, you don't support me, so you must be supporting them.
Right. Well, yeah, I guess because of the Ukrainian, it was like, it says here all right, so it was related to the Ukraine, so that at least had Russia on the table. It's not like she came out of nowhere but that's fascinating. Someone just recently did that about the Women's March, and they said that apparently Vladimir Putin is trying to break up the Women's March, and that's why there's all this controversy. I don't know if it was the same woman, but they basically made the same argument, which is hilarious.
I heard the same thing from Tim Pool. I don't think it's related to this, but
yeah,
you know, same type of you know, Chicken Little mindset. You know, the sky's falling, must be Putin or something.
So it's amazing. Weingarten will just put aside everything for if it's going to get the Dems political points. It doesn't matter what these people do. It's I'm not surprised. It's just it's quite a stark contrast. Like you would think that any sort of anti-Jewish sentiment she would be against, but clearly it depends on whether you have an R or a D next to your name.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, when you're talking about a lot of these stories, you know, whether it's the BDS issue or these teachers' unions or the Women's March, it just shows that a lot of Americans are more committed to supporting institutions than they are to supporting an actual position or policy. So you know, that's why I've written, before I actually wrote for your, you know, your site, I used to write a number of articles against the ADL, especially during the Han asshole Solo controversy, because I said, you know, you're actually making anti-Semitism worse because, you know, you're trying to paper over trolls and control speech, but in reality, people are going to say whatever the hell they want, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
So why encourage them? It's basically the Streisand effect, what they do.
So basically, so it looks like this political operative saw like an opportunity with Mallory and Saussure and the other girl, and they thought, oh, here's like kind of like a young demographic that we can possibly get into the Democratic Party. We'll just ignore the fact that if we're being consistent, you know, with how we present ourselves to the public, which is we're against all anti-Semitism, we're just going to have to put up with the fact that they believe the crazy shit Farrakhan believes about the Jews, but we'll ignore that because this could possibly open us up to like the, I guess, more leftist wing or the potentially whoever likes Saussure and all these people will come in and it's like it's very incestuous.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you see, for example, in Oz. You ever watch that show? So,
oh yeah,
you know, you see like, or what's that movie, American History X, when he realizes that the Nazi gang and the black gang really just cooperate to sell, you know, drugs in prison and stuff like that. So
yeah, ideology is just used to keep people in line.
Yeah, so you know, it's like, the thing is that the Women's March it has been a good vehicle to get people out to vote.
Right.
Or, you know, I think eventually it'll collapse in and on itself because there's really nothing that it actually accomplishes. It's the same as the March for Our Lives. You know, it's kind of you know, when you get those jerseys in recess class and people put them on and then they take them off at the end in PE class. You ever put on those?
Yeah.
Those like.
Yeah. I remember that.
You know, 1 month they're going to put on the March for Science jersey, and then, you know, a month later they put on the March for Our Lives jersey or whatever. It doesn't really matter. So Sarcer, I actually talked about this on I think it was Saturday night with Halsey News. I don't know if you know his channel, but Sarcer actually was with Black Lives Matter prior to the Women's March, and people were getting pissed at her because she was mugging for the camera a lot, and people thought she was going to run for city council. They thought that she was getting too close to Mayor de Blasio, and basically her reaction was, well, I'm getting shit done. So this is a person, she'll basically piggyback onto other movements. Now, I'm not saying she doesn't have an ideology behind it, but she's a careerist.
So, sort of, didn't she say? I mean, she basically made the comment that if without the hijab, you're a white girl from Brooklyn or something like that.
Yes, she said that. I think, 2 or 3 years ago. That was like a big deal.
Yeah, it was a very telling comment. All right, so let's see. Do you want to close with anything in regards to this, the Women's March article, before we get to the Mark Lamont Hill article on free speech?
I just, like, if you could just tell the chat to spread it. I think it's an issue that hasn't been covered anywhere else. It's sort of a scoop. And you're free to, if you want me to share it on your site as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll tweet these out at the end of the stream. I'll tweet these articles out, and you can post them in the chat if you want to, or and then you can post them on the website as well.
Okay, so essentially, I would say that's an article that is an exclusive as of right now, in terms of the Women's March.
Interesting. Yeah, basically the underbelly. This picture. This is basically the underbelly. This is. I really think it's no different than like Valerie Jarrett. Like, it's not a coincidence that, like, when the Parkland shooting happens and all of a sudden there's these photogenic young kids that are suddenly speaking very passionately about pro-Democrat talking points. It's not a coincidence that Valerie Jarrett is right there. Like, this is basically the same thing. These people see opportunity, and like, I think this is the difference, I think, between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans are politicians. They do all the fucked up shit that politicians do. The difference is they don't virtue signal to your face morally. That's the problem with the Democrats, and I think that's why they're so hateable. Because they will tell you to your face, you are a piece of shit because you told an anti-Semitic joke. Meanwhile, you are working with people that, under your definition, would be just as unacceptable. And no, not only are they not going to be held responsible if you dare say anything, that it's the end of you. That's really, I think, the difference. I don't like Republicans at all from, like, the political standpoint. I don't trust any politicians, but this is why the Democrats they're worse. They're worse. This is a horrible strategy that they've tried. I understand why they tried, because it's powerful and there's power in it. But I ultimately think it's going to be their undoing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if you want to make like the comparison, I think the Republican Party is corrupted a different way than the Democrats, right? Because they're kind of addicted to corporate cash and stuff like that. Yeah. There's today's example with Mitt Romney, but they don't go to the extent of the Democrats of basically telling you what to think and say.
Right.
The Republicans sometimes do it, but in a more passive and
they used to do it. Used to do it a lot with the religious right shit. They used to do it, but they were taken down a peg, and I guess we'll see if things go in the other direction, if they go back on the high horse, because I'll be saying the same shit, just in a different direction if they try to, I mean, it's just a lot of the arguments are the same. Don't do this, don't do that, don't watch this show, don't watch that show. It just seems like it's just much louder, and the religious right didn't really get into the places that leftists are in, university and what have you. And so but we'll see. Maybe they didn't learn a lesson, and as soon as they have the opportunity, they'll go right back to the bullshit.
Yeah. I think really the problem that I see, that with the two-party system, though, is when you see the Democrats smearing people, like with the Bernie Sanders people last year, and along the past 2 years. I've said several times I hate Bernie Sanders, but when they came up with the story that his forms were hacked by the Russians, you said with Valerie Jarrett, it was clear they had the right person to spread the lie at the right time. And
right.
They've done the same thing. I've had the joke that I put on my channel that I think I've had to defend like over a dozen left-wing politicians that I absolutely dislike, just because it's all a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
So I don't think that on the Republican Party they have the commitment to civil liberties that would satisfy me either. You really need kind of at this point other third parties that would be committed to those values. The Libertarian Party is even, they don't really stand up to the Google censorship and things like that. Some of their publications actually say, "Oh, they're corporations."
Right. That's a hard. I hate that
freedom of
argument.
speech too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, outside of, there's like a few politicians that talk a good game. So far, nothing's getting done. Hopefully, it's just, things take time and eventually something will happen. Because if nothing's done, this is going to be a long trek. And it's going to get probably very dark and very difficult.
Yep.
Because really, all it's going to take is a build-up until they can flick a switch. Like, a lot of these things, it's like a slow build, and I really think that, like, with deplatformings, you're seeing this build, and I think one day they're just going to be, instead of one person a week or one person every 2 weeks, there's just going to be a massive purge. And what could we really do about it? I think they have the power, and they're kind of getting us used to, okay, now, first it was Anglin, and then it's McGinnis, and then Sargon, and they're just going to continue to go down the list, because ultimately, like, you look at the attitude of Jack Conte with Patreon, they basically gave everyone the finger and said, fuck you, if you want to leave, because they know there's nowhere to go, because the banks are on their side.
Well, yeah. You're talking about. I mean, I recognize this when they banned the Doctor of Common Sense. I used to.
Oh yeah,
I used to listen to him when he. I didn't even take him seriously. I just thought it was hilarious that he would call Michelle Obama a man.
Yeah.
Because at the time, nobody else was willing to, like, really go. I mean, there was Joan Rivers, but he, like, went hard on it.
Yeah.
And the fact that they censored him showed, to me, it showed that they'll, basically they're censoring even the most ridiculous stuff. I like some stuff. I'm just saying that it shows how insecure they are.
Yeah.
And I think though that with Patreon, for example, it could be the first of the domino, because a lot of these companies they do depend on traffic. So they could live for a while on the diminishing groups of people on their platform, but eventually people abandon these apps. People are kind of leaving Facebook to some degree.
Yeah.
I unfortunately still use it to spread some of my articles, because the audience that I look for happens to use Facebook more. I do love using GAB, but there's just not enough people on it. But Twitter is in a world of trouble, people are saying. So they could censor all they want, but eventually even normal people will realize, well, I can't say, they'll ask, I mean, why can't I say that The Rock looks like a fucking Easter Island sculpture or something? It's fair.
Right.
Right. So they'll start to censor more and more ridiculous things, and less people will be on these platforms.
Yeah. Jesus.